This next question comes from Joy. Joy says, love the show. I don't get to catch you live, but your podcast always makes my workouts better after work. Keep going, Joy. You can do this as you're working out right now. I was wondering what grade you guys would give the Huskers hiring of Matt Rhule. I know what locals think, but I am wondering what the perception nationally is. Also, how does it rank with Wisconsin's hire of Luke Fickell? Thanks for the insight, guys. Go Big Red. Now, the Matt Rhule hire, of course, went official over Thanksgiving weekend, right? It was Friday, Black Friday, when we were getting the news live. We did an instant reaction show. We've had a lot more time to be able to digest it. And once the coaching carousel calms down, we will have our annual recap of the entire coaching carousel coming up. We do still have a few jobs left to fill before I feel like we can really put our stamp on it and consider the coaching carousel done for the offseason. But we will be doing that probably in early to mid-January. Let's let all the bowl games get through, and then we'll see if any more firings end up coming down the pike. But for Nebraska and Matt Rhule, we've had some time to digest it since our instant reaction show, and listeners want to know, and we'll give you the answers. What's the grade? What's the national perception?
The grade, I mean, again, I hate giving out grades. I have no idea if it'll work. I think, but based on fit and what we thought, I mean, as soon as the job came open, Matt Rhule was one of the first names we were all saying on this show as a name that made a whole lot of sense for that job, and he ended up getting it. So as far as that's concerned, I give it an A. And I do think that, nationally, I don't know what the national perspective is. I think everybody's just kind of moved on. Like, yeah, no, that makes plenty of sense. We'll see. I think that's kind of where Nebraska just is in the overall college football zeitgeist right now, whereas we've heard so much about that program in recent years with, Scott Frost was going to be the guy to save them. And this was going to be, and I think nationally outside of Lincoln, most people are just kind of taking a wait and see approach with Nebraska. Like they look at Matt Rhule and they say, that's a good hire. There's a lot of stuff in place there for Nebraska to win games. Big Ten's changing. Wait and see.
I agree with Tom on that. I think Matt Rhule is encouraging because he has had to build staffs to fit different places before.
Mm-hmm.
So Temple is very different than Baylor culturally. And he got guys who resonated in those markets, like different dudes. So I assume that he will do a good job of that with Nebraska. I'm just going to be looking to their recruiting class. Is Nebraska able to buy guys? That's kind of the thing there, because there's not a lot of talent around that school. You're not able to keep these dudes home as walk-ons and strength program them into All-Americans anymore. So are you out there competing for top kids and finding ways to get kids to come to Nebraska? That's what it's going to come down to. So I think Matt Rhule can coach. Can you get players?
What's the staff looking like so far?
So he's hired a couple dudes who've worked with him before. Did they hire a DC yet? I was looking at that over the weekend. I hadn't checked.
If they have, I didn't see it.
I'm assuming that the expectations are not going to give enough time for 2 really bad years before you pop, because that's what we saw at Baylor. Obviously he took over an awful situation from the roster to the atmosphere and environment around the program, and it was going to take a little bit. They really, really bottomed out there into the Bryles era, the 1 year of Jim Grobe. But I'm very curious to see how Matt Rhule has or hasn't been impacted by his time at the Carolina Panthers, because the one thing that I would describe from the Matt Rhule experience, at least my view of it from somebody who's not covering the NFL professionally, is that there was a big sort of like out of touch kind of feeling with him, especially with the people who cover the NFL and who cover the Carolina Panthers on a regular basis, that the way that a college coach can command that media room and sort of almost like force their messaging into existence, that there was a lot of pushback there. And I don't have a better feel for Lincoln in terms of whether that's going to work. I do think that works a lot more in college than it does at the NFL, but I'm curious to see how that sort of Lincoln community has or hasn't been affected by the Scott Frost experience, and whether they'll take to that same kind of messaging, that very collegiate approach of trying to make things maybe a little bit better than they really are, or at least like change the way that they're discussed. That's probably what I'm very interested in, the press conferences.
Back to the DC point. Friday, Matt Rhule announced that Tony White will be the Nebraska's defensive coordinator. He had been the defensive coordinator the last 3 years at Syracuse.
That's also a great hire.
Yep. And Donovan Raiola will remain as the offensive line coach too. So, yeah, no, I think back to your point there, Chip, I do think he will find the media in Lincoln much more amenable than what he found in the NFL. Yes.
So look at these faces.
It's the only show in town.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start telling them the way it is, you get a lot more like, you got it, coach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, listen, you found a spot where you're at least going to be able to do that.